Do you feel confused about nutrition? Are your family and friends confused too? Well, send them this video. I'm gonna clear that all up for all y'all. So let's talk about ancestral nutrition and why this provides clarity when we've been wildly overwhelmed. There is a lot of conflicting health advice out there. One day it's go low fat, and then all of a sudden you open your Google and the headlines all say try keto. And then you hear, no, keto's bad for your kidneys, go plant-based. And then it's actually, you need to eat your body weight in grams of protein. So I understand the problem here. You're not crazy for being confused. Our modern culture has strayed very far from intuitive knowledge about what really nourishes us, and we are just looking for the next expert to tell us what to do. But let's talk about the wisdom of traditional ancestral diets. This is so important for you to be able to frame any health information that you're getting related to nutrition. Dr. Weston A. Price was a pioneer in the field of nutrition because he was noticing skyrocketing rates of tooth decay and chronic illness in Western society. This was back in the 1930s, so the numbers were so much less than they are today, but he was already noticing a change after the Industrial Revolution as more shelf-stable processed foods, grains, and sugars were becoming the staples of our diet. And so he hypothesized that this is not a genetic issue. He just really didn't believe in that kind of eugenics perspective. He believed it was about degeneration caused by poor nutrition, and he blamed things like white flour, sugar, and processed oils, things that were just being introduced into Western culture at that time. So he did something really extraordinary. He traveled the world to document what he found. And so he went to a lot of communities that were still eating their ancestral diets that hadn't been touched by these modern industrial foods yet. And what he found was absolutely astonishing. Even though he made global observations and there were a lot of differences between the communities that he went to, there were some universal patterns. So no matter where he went, if he was in a mountain village in Switzerland, if he was in a coastal tribe in Ireland, if he was on the African savanna, if he was in the Arctic, the people who stuck to their traditional diets had straight and cavity-free teeth, robust jaws and skeletal structures, minimal chronic diseases, perfectly clear skin, very bright eyes, very strong cognition, easy, healthy pregnancies, and very low infant mortality, and the children were incredibly healthy as well. Yet these diets tended to look pretty different from one another. So for example, some would be very heavy in dairy, others wouldn't eat any dairy, but they ate a lot of seafood. Some included grains and legumes, others were so meat heavy that they were nearly carnivorous. But he still documented 5 things that were universally true across all of these communities. The first is that animal fats were a central part of the diet. So this should lead people to question any kind of low-fat dogma or fear-mongering around saturated fat that you see in any kind of modern nutritional advice. When Weston A. Price went around the world and he found the healthiest communities eating traditionally, they all prioritized animal fats in their diet. Now, for some people, this was from dairy. For some people, this was just from eating all the fat that was on their meat. For some, it was from eating organ meats that had a lot of fat around them. For some, it was eating fatty fish from seafaring communities. For some, it was knocking out the bone marrow or cooking the bone marrow in broths. And these made sure that people are getting all the essential fat-soluble vitamins. So A, D, and K are critical vitamins for immune health, for brain development, for bone strength, for hormone production. And Dr. Price, identified this as the X factor. So he wrote a lot about there's some kind of X factor in the animal fats that's causing people to have such robust health. And later, we think what he was observing was vitamin A or vitamin K2, or the interplay between these two vitamins. And it's because it helps us metabolize calcium and magnesium in and all these other minerals that we need to be intaking into our body and integrating into our body. So we now know that, yes, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, this directs minerals into the bones, into the teeth, and away from the soft tissues. And these are nutrients that are very low in modern and processed diets. So the second thing that he noticed is that all of these traditional cultures ate nose to tail. That means they did not just eat the muscle meat. They didn't just eat the steaks and the pork chops. They always ate the entire animal. They ate the organs, like the livers and the kidneys and the hearts. They ate the bones by boiling them in broth. They ate the skin. They would eat all the joints and tendons, like the ears and the tails and the feet. And these parts are not only really rich in minerals, but they're really high in certain amino acids. And the muscle meats have a different amino acid profile than things like the feet and the ears and the joints and the organs, because these amino acids will help build certain tissue building blocks. So they're richer in things like methionine and cysteine, and they make glutathione, and they are full of proline, which helps repair our gut lining and is a precursor to collagen. And it's just different than what we're getting from muscle meats. Muscle meats have a lot of great nutrients too, but it's going to provide deeper support for things like our gut lining and our skin and our joints and tissue repair. So we know now that we need a certain balance of glycine and methionine. So this is an example of how science later came back and corroborated what Dr. Price found. If we get too much of certain amino acids from muscle meats and not enough from these other more collagen-rich cuts of meat, we're going to actually have more inflammation in our body, and our methylation pathways are going to be impaired. The third thing is that all of these traditional societies included some kind of fermented food and some kind of raw food in their diet. And so Weston A. Price talked about this as live foods. So this could be fermented vegetables. It could be fermented dairy, like a yogurt or a kefir or a cheese. It could be sourdough, like fermented grains. Even fermented meats and fish in some Nordic cultures and Inuit or Arctic cultures. Also, sometimes it was raw dairy, sometimes it was raw fruit, sometimes it was raw vegetables like spring greens. But this means that there's a lot of enzymes and probiotics that were regularly consumed by all of these cultures, which is so important in populating the gut with beneficial microbes and enzymes that are going to support our digestion and our immune regulation. And so now we know, scientifically again, that there's certain strains of lactic acid producing bacteria that are in traditional fermented foods, and they improve our gut-brain axis, and they actively reduce our immune inflammation markers. Now the fourth thing he found is that hard to digest plant foods were always heavily processed. And by processed, I don't mean like as in modern processed foods, like a bunch of additives added to them, but they were soaked, sprouted, or fermented. So this includes things like grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. He just didn't see these eaten raw. He saw them heavily prepared. And this means that they are able to break down the anti-nutrients in these foods. So things like phytic acid and lectins and oxalates, these block mineral absorption and tend to irritate the gut lining. And traditional people know this, and so they take a lot of care because there are a lot of great nutrients and high amounts of calories in these foods. So we don't need to not ever eat them, but we just need to know how to prepare them properly. And again, scientific studies have now shown that yes, fermenting grains before baking them reduces the phytic acid content by up to 90%. And this means you're going to absorb a lot more of the minerals in those grains. So you're going to be able to absorb your iron and your zinc and your magnesium, where if you bake some grains without fermenting it first, you're actually not going to absorb those minerals as well from that food. And speaking of minerals, the fifth thing was that People in these traditional cultures went far out of their way to seek out mineral-rich food and waters. Minerals are essential, meaning we cannot make them in our body, we must receive them from our diet. And so what he found is that traditional people would travel really far distances or engage in really elaborate trade routes in order to access mineral-rich water, like coming off of glaciers, sea salts or inland salts, and seafood, especially things like fish eggs and seaweed, knowing that the minerals in these foods were essential for fertility and the growth of children and just overall vitality. And it's sure enough, now we know for sure that trace minerals, especially things like iodine and selenium, are super important for so many functions in the body, especially our sex hormone function and our thyroid health. So again, traditional people really just knew this intuitively. So it's important that we know how to integrate these lessons into everyday life and that we make sure that we look at any modern nutrition research that's coming out. So when you go into Google and you look at the headlines and there's some new study that's come out that says something or another, think about, does it integrate with these principles? Because if it doesn't, it's very probable that these researchers working in a lab far removed from any kind of ancestral environmental context are probably missing something. And so it's really important to be skeptical and have this ancestral framework when you're looking at nutrition research or nutrition fads or nutrition trends. Does it fit into those 5 principles? So there's 2 books that I recommend if you want to help understand all of this a little more deeply. The first one is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon and the Weston A. Price Foundation. I really think this is a timeless classic. It's an encyclopedia of traditional cooking methods. So it teaches you how to make stocks, how to make ferments, how to prepare organ meats, how to source high-quality dairy. It's full of tons of research. It has some of Weston A. Price's research in it if you don't want to read his whole book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. That's a little bit of a hard read, and so she synthesizes it really well. And there's also a lot of other anthropological research and reports that she's compiled in there from other early researchers on nutrition as well. So it's not just a cookbook, it's also just a really, really insightful guide into how to eat a traditional diet. I also want to plug the book Eat Like a Human by Dr. Bill Schindler. He's an anthropologist and he has also done a lot of studies cross-culturally with different tribes and people living in an ancestral way across the world. And he is really good at distilling some of the practices that people do in these traditional cultures and simplifying it into a way that you can bring into your kitchen and be able to apply some of these principles that's going to work for your life. So he teaches you how to ferment things, cook nose to tail, prepare things like grains properly, and it's very, very approachable. So if you're ready to ditch diet culture and fads and whatever research is trending on Google right now and reclaim a way of eating that is actually deeply ancestral and sustainable and has been proven through time to be the best thing for our health, these are 2 books that I really recommend getting. So yeah, don't think of this as a short-term fix of just, oh, I gotta do a cleanse or a reset. But I really want you to focus on shifting your identity around, I value giving my body what it evolved to eat, what it was designed to eat. And so you start eating nourishing foods because you want to live in integrity with your values of building resilience in your body, of becoming more vital, of honoring ancestral wisdom and cultivating your deep wellness. And that's what's going to make these practices sustainable and not so overwhelming. So again, if you liked what I had to say here, make sure you like and share this with a friend, and let's see if we can get our neighborhoods and our families to adopt some of these principles together. We always make changes better when we are doing it in community.